Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Alexis and today I'm just going to be sharing my thoughts on the 9 books that I read for the month of September 2021. Now, I realize it's been quite a few weeks since I posted my last video and it's almost the end of October, but hey, I only do this for fun and I just want to express my enjoyment for the books I've read. Now, with that being said, the first one I'm going to talk about is Beverly Jenkins' Topaz. I will say this now, every single book that I've been reading, the cleverness for the name of the title, Topaz, when you realize why it's named Topaz, just know that there is a connection between Catherine and Dixon in the story that it just made the story that much more enriching for me. Now, if you don't already know, Beverly Jenkins is the queen of African American historical romances, and I say this because not only is she great at world building, and there's interconnected stories, by the way. I will eventually be doing a video about those books that are interconnected, but aside from the world building, she's very educated and she expresses that inner story. She educates your readers on the historical aspects of, how it was for people of color in America around the time period it was set. I believe this was the late 1880s, because it's post Civil War era. And essentially, Marshall Dixon Wildhorse is, a man of, the law. So he essentially is looking for Catherine Love's father who stole something of his, and he's seeking payback. When he finally finds Catherine's father, he ends up saying, "Hey, why don't you just marry my daughter, so we can settle this?" And Dixon takes him up on that. I'll admit, when I realized what the story was going into, marriage of convenience, I was a little unsure of how it would play out. But don't let that fool you. Dixon is such a gentleman to Catherine. Catherine, on her end, is very stubborn and very ambitious. She is a writer for a well known newspaper by people of color. And in the middle of, trying to uncover a story and the truth about said story, she gets herself in a pickle by, getting caught and being forced to marry the person she was after. That way they can't write about him and, other sticky situations. So, she was, in fact, already in the process of getting married, but the ceremony hadn't been completed yet. And Dixon comes in and rescues her, only to marry her, and she didn't even realize until it was happening. So, I love the level of banter in here. I love, again, the interconnected stories. I did read a couple stories before this, that are connected, but time wise, this is technically first of those books. But again, you can read them as standalones. They're not advertised as a series anyway. So when I realized they were connected, it just made me all the more in love with Auntie Bev's books. Can I call her Auntie? I want to call her Auntie because, that's for me an honorary title. When anytime, especially if you're not related to people, you always love calling your aunties and uncles, okay? Because they're just that good, okay? Moving on, because again, I will be talking about Topaz among other books that I'm alluding to that are interconnected. But know that historical romances in general tend to have bigotry issue. Of course, considering this is about people of color in America, there's this level of racism, sexism, bigotry, and death involved. A little bit of suspense, but I wouldn't say the whole book was revolving around that. It was more towards the end, because, there needs to be a climactic, thing to happen before everything finally has its happily ever after, if you will. Next, after Topaz, I read my first book by Jennifer Ashley. Now, this is The Madness of Lord Ian McKenzie. It is the first book of her Mackenzies and McBride's series. As of now, I believe there are 12 books in that series, and I have yet to dive into that because that's very ambitious. Very ambitious. But essentially, Ian is the fourth son of a duke. He is autistic, But of course, around that time period, no one knew what that was, so they didn't know how to handle it. They just thought he was unfortunately insane and mad, so he was put in an asylum, uh, or some kind of, I believe it was an asylum, after witnessing something horrific happen. And I'm not going to say what that was, just know it was horrific. And knowing that on top of the torture and ridicule that Ian receives, gut wrenching. But I was pleasantly surprised by his treatment and his relationship with Beth. Now, Beth is a widow and she is a little bit older than Ian, but not, drastically, not double digit old. No. So I wouldn't call this an age gap romance by any means. It's, I believe, even less than 5 years. But their relationship starts, and she, in fact, because of her kindness and compassion, she came to inherit something from a nice lady. And people were constantly trying to, or assumed that she was going to be with Ian for potential wealth. I mean, people made assumptions on why would she be with Ian when she could be with someone else who was sane. And that was so, just, when I tell you, this was so pleasantly surprising for me. I mean, it does include a level of suspense. There is murder involved here, torture, assault, bigotry between classes, a lot of heartache. But again, when you realize the level of commitment Ian has for Beth and how they are, they're so compassionate and understanding toward each other, their level of communication is something I think people should strive for. I mean, Ian can't help but be honest, and it's so it's so sweet. I mean, he's such a golden boy for me. Well, not a boy, golden man, I guess you could say. But again, was intrigued enough to continue with the series, but again, I'll get into that towards the later books. After Jennifer Ashley's first book, I ended up going into the Kingmakers book by Kennedy Ryan. That is the first book of her All the King's Men series. And there are 3 books in that. Technically, the first 2 are a duology. That would be the Kingmaker and the Rebel King. Now, I did, again, tab these. Ooh, let's see here. I did tab these a little bit for my level of enjoyment. But it does start off with the Kingmaker. I will say, again, the creativity of the title names, and again, look at that artwork. Like, it's so beautiful. Black and gold. Black and anything just looks great to me. I mean, black and pink is my favorite combination, and she did it here. But before I get into Queen Move, I'm going to talk about Kingmaker and the Rebel King. Now, the Kingmaker is the first book about Lennox and Maxim. Again, these books have to be read together because book 1 does leave off on a end off on a quick a cliffhanger, excuse me, and essentially they meet at a protest. Lennox is of a Native American background, and she is fighting for their land that again was promised them. And of course, America has this issue with promises and being able to keep them. But I digress. This couple presents an ideal in America, in politics, in relationships, something that I feel like, I don't know, maybe it could be the how I was raised, or my background. I am technically of Gen Z, and I feel like we're very much an open-minded group of people, but we still have this level of ambition that not always understood. um, but again, I digress. The Kingmaker is essentially between Lennox and Maxim. Now, Maxim, he is the son of the man who owns the oil company that is stealing the land from Lennox family and Lennox people. Um, Lennox did experience a loss that I'm not going to say who or what happened, because again, you need to read it so you learn more. And similar to, I I feel like what Beverly Jenkins does, similar to what she does. Whereas Beverly Jenkins does that historically, Kennedy Ryan manages to do the same thing with contemporary in terms of educating readers, but still creating a intriguing plot. Okay, such an intriguing plot that you are so captivated enough to realize that it's not just the romance. Of course, that's a big piece of the cake, right? But there's a little sprinkle of politics, a little sprinkle of ambition, a little sprinkle of, fighting for what's right. And I'm maybe downplaying a little bit because that is essentially the plot of Maxim and Lennox situation, and trying to find a level of balance for their respective fields. Um, Although, Maxim is the son of said oil company owner, he does want to be very progressive and go into eco friendly work. And he's hoping to do that, right? Whereas Lennox, she always knew she wanted to do something related to civil rights and campaigning, things like that. So, again, I don't know if I'm hinting, but you can figure it out what is the meaning behind these titles, the Kingmaker and the Rebel King. I'm going to leave it off at that. They meet at a protest when Lennox is 17 and Maxim is already into his early 20s. Nothing happened when she was underage, okay? They just met, okay? And then they, part ways, run into each other again when they're a little older, and they finally let things fly. Maxim does hide his identity a bit from Lennox, and that causes a little communication issue. But certainly by the end of this book, it somewhat is resolved, but it does leave off on a cliffhanger. So if you finish this, you're going to immediately want to get The Rebel King. And these books were just so perfect to me. I mean, aside from it being presented, of course, okay, politics ends up being a touchy subject for a lot of reasons, right? It affects our lifestyle, it affects people we care about, and some people go into politics or only think of themselves, which again also makes sense, but kind of sucks if you're not thinking about other people, right? We want to show compassion here. And the way it's presented in those books presents this ideal that I connected with. I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter regardless what your political party is to me. What essentially matters is where you stand on your morals and when are you going to, accommodate your morals or the person you're voting for, whatever party you support, right? If you have to compromise in some way, what are you compromising? And this does end up question that for readers. I mean, there were times where I was like, can I agree with this? I don't know. But do I want to believe that they'll do something better than what I'm thinking? Yeah, for sure. There's an ideal. And I enjoyed that aspect of Maxim because he was the type of person who would move people in a way with his words, with his actions, and his success already preceded him. His reputation preceded him, as does Lennox, and they both have this level of understanding towards each other, this level of commitment, this drive to do what's best or what they think is best, whether other people agree with them or not. And of course, there are going to be other people against them, and that is what drives the story for me. Um, with that being said, read the duology. But if you want to just get into, excuse me, I was about to say Beverly. If you want to get into Kennedy Ryan's books, you can start off with Queen Move. Some people argue that this is more of a woman's fiction book. I disagree because I feel like there is this balance between Kimba and Ezra's story. Now, Kimba, the heroine of the story, is the best friend of Lennox, and she is also in the same campaign business as Lennox. They are business partners. So she is pretty independent in those books until, again, she runs into Ezra. Now, Ezra is her childhood friend and not quite sweetheart because their chance the first time was kind of taken from them because of family feuding situation. And that's all I'm going to say. They had a fallout. And by they, I mean their families, not between Kimba and Ezra. They were always clutch, okay? Ezra, as a kid, okay, mind you, there was this thing that happened at school. And that's all I'm going to say. There's this thing that happened at school, and he shielded Kimba. And then there was this other time when Ezra was being teased and Kimba stood up for him. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it at that. Just know it was really cute, and I thought it was just so sweet. And just as children, right? Children can be really cruel, okay, when it comes to bullying and teasing, but they can also be really kind and surprising. And that's how Kimba and Ezra were for each other, in my opinion. When they meet years later, it's when Kimba's at an event, and so is Ezra, and she realized, oh, it's the same person. Like, I remember you. I knew you when we were young. And they take this as an opportunity to, you know, have some fling. On Kimba's end, she wasn't looking for anything serious, and Ezra, although he agreed, as soon as they start to get into it, he's like, actually, you know what? No, I want strings. And, couldn't help but love this. I mean, friends to lovers, second chance. And I don't know if it's just me, but I definitely was the type of person to crush for a long time on my childhood crush. And this just gave me, butterflies. This definitely gave me butterflies. Something does happen towards the third quarter of the book, for plot wise, that I know some people get touchy. And in my opinion, the way it's displayed here, considering not some families aren't considered conventional, but in my opinion, they are still worthwhile. And that is what happens here. That's all I'm going to say, because, some people don't like that. And, not all households contain two parents, whether that be they leave or they stayed. Not all parents stay together. Some get divorced or separate. Not all parents are in a heterosexual relationship. Some are. But again, not all. And it can still be healthy and loving in those relationships, even if it's not conventional. But that is all I will say about the remaining of the plot. If you've read this book already, you can kind of see where I'm going with this, but I know there were some reviews that were really annoyed with what happened towards the third quarter. Just know I gave it 5 stars. I appreciated it. I thought it was very inclusive in terms of family dynamics. So, with that being said, I'm gonna move on. Next book after the Queen Move story, I will go into When a Scot Ties the Knot, and that is by Tessa Dare. Initially, this piqued my interest because I watched the To All the Boys I Loved Before movie and the other two. I never read the books. It's a YA romance. I, again, never read the books, but I've definitely seen the title. I've seen the movies. I've seen the books on the shelves. I just never was interested to read them. But I've seen other YouTubers and other book lovers say that this gives off the same vibes of, sending letters and getting a lover and that aspect. Now, this is between Maddie and Logan. Maddie is of English background. There we go. And she doesn't want to be courted. In fact, she gets very nervous around people. So she decides to come up with this fake person and write letters to him and address it to Logan. But turns out Logan's a real person, and all of a sudden, years later, he turns up on her door or at her door and say, hey, you wrote to me, so let's get married like you wanted in your stories. I thought it was a cute idea. I can't say the writing really intrigued me that much. I did end up giving this only 3 stars. In fact, this is in her Castles Ever After series by Tessa Dare. This is the third book, and this was the only one I was piqued enough to read. And now, after reading it, I can't say I'm interested at all to read the remainder of her series because this writing kind of felt younger for me. It just, the way it was written, I can't say it was that enjoyable for me. It was only average, and the plot of what was happening, it could have been more. I mean, it felt very lax. It could have been more dramatic. It could have had more drama involved. But again, 3 stars. I'm not going to give it much more than that. It does involve this idea of falsehood and a little bit of memory loss, abandonment, um, death of loved one. Things happen. After that, I went into Night Song by Beverly Jenkins. Now, this was her first historical romance publishing, and this is not the original cover. In fact, the original cover is very hard to find. But this is between Carly Henson and Sergeant Chase Jefferson. Now, Carly, in fact, witnessed something when she was younger, the death of a loved one at the hands of Union soldiers, and because of that, it made her not trust them. And you know what? It turns out Chase is a said soldier, and although that event for her loved one happened when she was younger, she meets Chase years later, and they didn't think it was going to be a long term relationship. I mean, in fact, they had, lovers' interactions, and then Chase leaves, and then he returns after certain things happen. Again, I'm not going to get into it because that's going to reveal too much about the plot. Carly is a teacher, and because of said events, people start to judge her for it. And Chase wants to protect her. That's all I'm going to say. If he can figure it out, cool. If not, that's fine. Just go ahead and read it. Now, this book does involve murder, assault, abduction, colorism, prejudice, surprise. That's all I'm going to say. Somewhat long distance, like I said, relationship, and a lot of sass, a lot of passion. I guess that's to be expected with Beverly Jenkins heroines because they always have a lot of sass, a lot of class, and they just, they're just very strong women, and we love that. We love that in characters, in historical romances. We love that, and we love a man who can respect it. But again, I'll continue. I gave that book only 4 stars, though, instead of 5, because I felt the beginning was a little slower paced for me. But again, it does start to pick up. I mean, especially towards the end when things, climax and then, settle down to their happy ending. I thought it was cute. So, again, 4 stars because slower pace in the beginning. After that, I read my first book by Anna Huang titled Twisted Love, and this is about Alex and Ava. Now, Alex, he is a tortured hero. That's what I'll say. Because something happened when he was younger, and he's definitely a grumpy person. And because of said things, he definitely plots. That's what I'm going to say. And Ava piques his interest for reasons. This is a best friend's or brother's best friend trope. This is a grumpy sunshine trope. It's very obvious because, it's so obvious to the point where Alex calls Ava Sunshine. And I thought that was much. But then as the movie, excuse me, as the book progressed, this definitely goes into that. I will say that I did already talk about this by itself, and this is the first of 4 books. The second one, Twisted Games, is already out. Twisted Hate is supposed to come out in January, and in fact, I think I'm most excited to read that one of the sequels. I have yet to get Twisted Games because of what is alluded to in Twisted Hate. Twisted Hate, it's already clear it's going to be about Josh and one of Ava's friends. I know who said friend is, but I'm not going to say because you guys got to read it to pique your interest. But no, I love it when it's a hate to love, and I love friends to lovers. Those are the two that I enjoy. Okay, next I have after that. Oh, and I did give Anna Huang's book 4 stars, by the way. Again, if you want a full dive review, feel free to check out that video individually. Lastly, I have Lazy. That's not the book. Lady Isabella's Scandalous Marriage. Now, this is the book that follows The Madness of Lord Ian McKenzie by Jennifer Ashley. This is about Mac McKenzie, or Roland McKenzie, but he goes by Mac, and his wife, Isabella, who he's already married to. And we already knew that because of Ian's book, but pretty much they were married quickly by elopement the night that they met because they were immediately attracted to each other and wanted to be together. But after 3 years of marriage, they have a fallout. Mac was a kind of a drunk, and Isabella goes through something, and all of a sudden she can't take it anymore. And although she loves him, she has to leave for both of their sakes because they constantly hurt each other. And this is kind of them getting to know each other again after 3 years of marriage and after a while apart. Isabella learns that someone is forging Mac's artwork, and he is very good at his artwork, but someone who is in fact more talented is giving him credit by putting his name on there. Just understand that there's a real madman in here, and there's this idea of false identity, and there's level of danger in here, but not as much as Ian's story. In fact, there's more heartache in here, I think, because um, there's a heavy break. That's what I'll say. There's a heavy break between Isabella and Mac that they needed to resolve, and just relearn things about each other, as well as acknowledge the things that they loved each other the first time they were together. So with that being said, I did give this 4 stars, but because of how hurt the amount of hurt my heart was going through as I was reading that, I just excuse that. The amount of hurt that I was going through as I was reading it, I am going to take a step back before I continue on to the next one, which is, I believe, The Many Sins of Lord Cameron. I want to say. I could be wrong about the title, but it's supposed to be the 3rd book, and Mac McKenzie, or Roland McKenzie, who goes by Mac, he is the 3rd eldest of 4, and then Ian was the youngest, and Cameron is the 2nd eldest, and then the 4th book is the eldest, who's now Duke. But I'm going to take a break on that series because, again, the heartache in Isabella's story, I'm not sure if I'm ready to continue. I'm not ready. But for now, that is all I will say. Again, thank you for watching if you made it this far. I do intend on doing a certain trilogy related or series videos about certain authors that I just started diving into, and I'll explain why later on. But for now, thank you for watching. Again, my name is Alexis, and take care. Bye.